You arrive in California as a decent man. You have values, morals, a sense of right and wrong. You believe in fairness, honesty, and human dignity. Within 6 months, you're willing to kill someone over a shovel. Within a year, you've watched men hang without trial and felt nothing. Within 2 years, you've done things you once thought unthinkable, stolen, lied, cheated, maybe worse, and you sleep fine at night. What happened to you? Early California happened. This isn't a story about bad people doing bad things. This is about what happens when you take ordinary human beings, farmers, clerks, family men, people who went to church back home, and drop them into a world so brutal, so lawless, so devoid of consequences that morality itself becomes a luxury no one can afford. Early California didn't just test men, it broke them. It stripped away everything civilized about them and revealed, or created, something monstrous underneath. Men who would never have stolen a penny back home robbed their partners and felt justified. Men who believed in justice participated in lynch mobs and convinced themselves it was righteous. Men who valued human life killed other men over insults, over claims, over nothing at all. And here's what's terrifying: they weren't psychopaths. They weren't evil. They were normal, just like you. But early California had a way of turning normal into monstrous, of taking your values and crushing them under the weight of desperation, greed, fear, and survival, of making you choose between your morals and your life, and discovering that your morals weren't as strong as you thought. This is the story of how a place, a specific time and location, transformed human beings into versions of themselves they wouldn't have recognized. How the gold rush didn't just bring out the worst in people, it created the worst in people. Let me show you exactly how it happened, and why it could have happened to you too. January 1848. Gold is discovered at Sutter's mill. Word spreads, and by 1849 over 80,000 people from across the globe descend on California like a human flood. They're not criminals. They're not outlaws. They're farmers from Missouri, clerks from New York, shopkeepers from Boston, laborers from China, miners from Chile, merchants from France. They're ordinary men chasing an extraordinary dream, instant wealth. But here's what they find: chaos. California in 1849 is not a society. It's barely even a territory. It won't become a state until 1850, which means there's no real government, no established law, no institutions, no structure, no accountability. The population explodes from under 15,000 to over 250,000 in just 4 years. But nothing, absolutely nothing, is built to support them. San Francisco transforms from a sleepy settlement into a lawless boom town virtually overnight. Tents and ramshackle wooden buildings spread like a disease. The streets are mud and sewage. Ships rot in the harbor, abandoned by crews who deserted to search for gold. The mining camps scattered through the Sierra Nevada are even worse. They're just temporary settlements, collections of tents and crude shelters thrown up wherever someone thinks there might be gold. No governance, no law enforcement, no social structure. And into this vacuum come tens of thousands of men, mostly men, separated from their families, their communities, everything that once kept them civilized. Back home, you had neighbors who knew you, a reputation to maintain, a church community, family. Social pressure to behave, consequences for bad behavior, the architecture of civilization that keeps humans acting human. Here, you have none of that. You're anonymous. No one knows your real name. No one knows where you're from. No one cares. You could be a preacher or a con man, and it makes no difference because there's no way to verify anything about you. The men around you are strangers, competitors, threats. You trust no one because trusting the wrong person can get you robbed or killed. And the governing principle isn't law or morality, it's survival and greed. There are no courts you can rely on, no police who will protect your rights, no social contract. The only thing that matters is gold. And everyone around you wants it as badly as you do. The environment itself is hostile and unforgiving. Brutal summers, freezing winters, dangerous working conditions, disease everywhere. Death is commonplace. And you're desperate. You spent everything you had to get here. You traveled for months. You endured incredible hardships. You watch people die on the journey. You arrived with dreams of wealth, but the reality is that gold is scarce, claims are already taken, and you're running out of money fast. So you face a choice: adapt to this new world and do whatever it takes to survive and succeed, or fail, starve, and die. And here's the truth: most men chose to adapt. They shed their morals like unnecessary weight. They became what the environment demanded they become: ruthless, violent, selfish, monstrous. Not because they were inherently evil, but because early California rewarded monstrosity and punished virtue. This is how the transformation begins. This is the world that will remake you. And once it starts, there's no going back. Let's talk about what daily survival does to your sense of morality. You're living in conditions that would be condemned as inhumane today. You're in a canvas tent on dirt. No heat in winter, no cooling in summer, no privacy, no hygiene. You're surrounded by men who smell like you smell: unwashed, filthy, rank, and you're hungry, constantly, knowingly hungry. Food is scarce and absurdly expensive. A single egg costs $1, equivalent to about $35 today. A pound of bread might cost you a day's wages. You're eating the same terrible food every day: beans, salt pork, hardtack. You're malnourished. Your body is breaking down from lack of proper nutrition. And when you're hungry enough, morality becomes abstract. You see another man's food supplies sitting outside his tent while he's working his claim. You know stealing is wrong. You were raised better than that, but you're starving and he's not there and no one's watching, so you take it. The first time you feel guilty. You rationalize it, you tell yourself you'll pay him back, that you needed it more, that he can afford it, but the guilt eats at you. The second time is easier. The guilt is quieter. By the 10th time, you don't feel anything at all. Stealing is just survival. Everyone does it. And if you don't take what you need, someone else will take from you. You've become a thief. Not because you're inherently dishonest, but because early California made honesty unaffordable. Now let's talk about water. Water is scarce in the dry season, contaminated in the mining areas. You're thirsty and the nearest clean water source is miles away, but there's a water barrel at another camp. Do you take it? Back home, you'd never dream of it, but here you're desperate, and desperation drowns out conscience. You take the water. Maybe you tell yourself they can get more. Maybe you just don't care anymore, and now you're a thief twice over. Or maybe you stake a claim. You work it for weeks, finding barely enough gold to survive. Then you discover that someone else is working the same area at night, stealing your gold. You're furious. You're outraged. You confront him. He denies it. There are no authorities to appeal to, no courts, no law, so what do? Back home, you'd report him. You'd let the system handle it. Here, you are the system. You threaten him. Maybe you hit him. Maybe you chase him off with a gun. Maybe you do worse. And suddenly you're using violence to solve problems. You've become the kind of man who settles disputes with his fists or a weapon. This is what daily survival in early California does. It erodes your moral foundation, one small compromise at a time. You lie about where you found gold to protect your claim. You cheat at cards because everyone else is cheating. You overcharge a desperate man for food because he'll pay it, and you need the money more than you need a clear conscience. Each transgression is small, justifiable, rational even, but they accumulate. They build on each other. And before you realize it, you're not the person you were when you arrived. And the worst part, you're surrounded by men going through the same transformation. Everyone is lying, stealing, cheating, threatening. It becomes normal, expected. The new baseline of acceptable behavior. Morality requires a moral community. It requires social pressure to uphold standards. It requires consequences for bad behavior and rewards for good behavior. Early California has none of that. Instead, it rewards ruthlessness. It rewards selfishness. It rewards violence and cunning and the willingness to do whatever it takes. The men who maintain their morals, who refuse to steal, who won't cheat, who try to be decent, they're the ones who fail. They starve. They get taken advantage of. They get robbed by men with fewer scruples. They suffer while the ruthless thrive. And you watch this happen. You see good men fail and bad men succeed. And you learn the lesson California is teaching you. Morality is for people who can afford it, and you can't afford it. So you let it go, piece by piece, compromise by compromise, theft by theft, lie by lie, act of violence by act of violence. Until one day you look at yourself and realize you've become someone you don't recognize. You've become monstrous, and the scariest part, it felt inevitable, natural, necessary. That's what survival in early California does to a normal man. Now let's talk about what poverty and desperation do to your soul. You came to California to get rich. That was the promise. That was the dream. Strike gold, make your fortune, return home a wealthy man. But within weeks of arriving, you realize the dream is a lie. The easy gold is already gone. The good claims are taken. The only gold left requires expensive equipment you can't afford, or it's in locations controlled by big mining companies who will never let you near it. So you're broke, you're desperate, and you'll do anything for money. You take a job working for someone else's claim. Backbreaking labor for maybe $3 to $6 a day. You're working 14-hour days in brutal conditions. You're destroying your body for wages that barely cover food and shelter, and you're surrounded by wealth or the promise of it. You hear stories every day of men who struck it rich. You see the lucky few spending gold dust like it's nothing. The inequality is maddening. You're working yourself to death while others get rich through pure luck. It's not fair. It's not just, and it makes you angry, bitter, resentful, and that resentment starts to warp you. You start to think, why shouldn't I take what I need? Why should I play by rules that clearly don't apply to everyone else? Why should I be honest when dishonest men are getting ahead? So you start looking for shortcuts, angles, ways to get ahead that don't involve breaking your back for pennies. Maybe you start claim jumping, moving boundary markers at night to steal part of someone else's claim. It's theft technically, but you rationalize it. They have more than they need. You need it more. Everyone's doing it. Or maybe you start salting claims, planting fake gold to trick someone into buying a worthless piece of land. You're literally committing fraud. But you tell yourself they should have been smarter. This is business. This is survival. Or maybe you form a partnership with someone, work a claim together, and then when you finally find gold, you kill your partner and keep it all. That sounds extreme. That sounds like murder, and it is. But here's the thing. It happened constantly in early California. Partners killed each other over gold. Men murdered strangers for the contents of their pockets. And every single one of them had probably considered themselves decent people back home. What changed? Desperation changed. Poverty changed. The complete absence of consequences changed. Because here's the reality. If you kill your partner out in a remote mining camp, who's going to know? Who's going to investigate? Who's going to punish you? There are no police, no detectives, no forensics. You bury the body, you take the gold, you tell everyone your partner left for San Francisco, and life goes on. You've committed murder, you've become a killer, and you're probably going to get away with it. This is what poverty and desperation do in an environment without law or accountability. They turn ordinary men into criminals, into killers. And it's not just murder, it's everything. You're running a business. You water down the whiskey. You use false weights to cheat customers. You sell contaminated food and defective equipment because regulations don't exist and there are no consequences. You're a merchant. You form a cartel with other merchants to fix prices, gouging desperate men who have no choice but to pay. You're a banker. You charge predatory interest rates. You foreclose on claims at the first missed payment. You grow wealthy on other men's desperation. Every interaction becomes transactional, exploitative. You're constantly looking for ways to extract value from other people to get ahead at someone else's expense. Because that's what early California teaches you. Life is a zero-sum game. Someone wins and someone loses. And you're going to make damn sure you're the one who wins. The concept of mutual prosperity, of community benefit, of rising together, those ideas don't exist here. Everyone is competition. Everyone is a potential threat or a potential mark. And this mindset, this ruthless, exploitative, predatory mindset, it becomes your default. It becomes who you are. You're no longer thinking about fairness or justice or what's right. You're thinking about what you can get away with, how you can profit, how you can win. You've become the kind of person who sees other human beings as obstacles or opportunities, not as people with their own rights and dignity and worth. You've become monstrous, and the worst part, in early California, this makes you successful. This makes you one of the smart ones, the survivors. The men with morals are the ones who fail. Now let's talk about what constant exposure to death does to your humanity. In early California, death is everywhere. It's routine, commonplace, unremarkable. People die every single day from disease, accidents, violence. You see bodies, you smell death. You get used to it in a way that would have horrified you back home. And this normalization of death, this constant proximity to mortality, it changes something fundamental in you. You stop valuing human life the way you once did. You can't afford to. Because if you mourned every death, if you felt the full weight of every lost life, you'd be emotionally destroyed within weeks. So you develop a callousness, a hardness. You see a man die of cholera in a tent next to yours, and you step over his body on your way to work. Someone else will deal with it eventually. You watch a man die in a mining accident, crushed by falling rock or buried in a cave-in, and you feel nothing but relief that it wasn't you. You don't even learn his name. Bodies are found in the woods, murdered for their gold. You hear about it and shrug, not your problem, not your concern. This emotional numbing, this deliberate suppression of empathy, it's a survival mechanism, but it also makes you monstrous. Because once you stop caring about death, once you stop valuing human life, it becomes much easier to cause death. A man cheats you in a business deal. Back home, you'd be angry, but you'd move on. Here, you shoot him, because his life doesn't really matter to you anymore. None of their lives matter. You're in a confrontation. Someone insults you, threatens you, reaches for a weapon, and you kill them without hesitation, without remorse, because you've seen so much death that causing it yourself doesn't feel like a moral line anymore, and you certainly don't get punished for it. There's no trial, no investigation. People heard he threatened you first. Self-defense. Case closed, except there was no case. This is what early California does. It makes killing easy, socially acceptable, normal. Vigilante justice becomes standard. You're part of a mob that drags a man from his tent and hangs him from a tree. Maybe he's guilty of stealing, maybe he's not. You don't actually know, but everyone says he is, and the mob is angry and you're part of it. You watch him struggle at the end of a rope. You watch him die, and you feel nothing. Maybe you even feel satisfied, righteous, like you've made the camp safer. You've just participated in murder. But you don't think of it that way. You think of it as justice, as necessity. This is how normal men become monsters. Through a gradual process of desensitization. Through exposure to so much death that causing it yourself stops feeling significant. And disease makes it even worse. Because disease kills indiscriminately and you can't do anything about it. You watch good men die of cholera. You watch children die of typhoid. You watch strong men waste away from tuberculosis or scurvy. And if good people die for no reason, if virtue offers no protection, if death is arbitrary and meaningless, then what's the point of being good? If the universe is indifferent, if survival is just luck, if death comes for everyone regardless of their moral character, then why constrain yourself with outdated notions of right and wrong? You might as well take what you can get while you're alive. You might as well do whatever serves your interests, because morality doesn't protect you from cholera. Honor doesn't stop a cave-in. Virtue doesn't prevent murder. In early California, death teaches you that life is cheap, that nothing matters, that only survival counts. And once you internalize that lesson, you've completed your transformation. You're no longer the person who arrived full of hope and values. You're something else now, something darker, something monstrous. Let's talk about what happens to your moral center when violence becomes your primary tool for solving problems. In early California, there is no functioning justice system. None. And that absence creates a vacuum that violence rushes to fill. Someone steals from you. You can't call the police. There are no police you can trust. You can't file charges. There are no courts that function properly. You can't expect justice through legal channels because legal channels barely exist. So what do? You handle it yourself with violence. You confront the thief. You threaten him, you beat him, maybe you kill him. and everyone agrees that you had the right to do so. He wronged you. You retaliated. That's justice in early California. And here's what this does to you. It makes you the arbiter of right and wrong. It makes you judge, jury, and executioner. It gives you the power to inflict violence whenever you feel justified. And you always feel justified. Someone looks at you wrong, disrespects you, questions your honor. These become justifications for violence. Because in a world without law, reputation is everything. And reputation is maintained through the willingness to use force. If you let insults slide, if you back down from confrontation, you're seen as weak. And weakness makes you a target, so you become hypervigilant, hypersensitive, quick to anger, ready to fight at the slightest provocation. You're in a saloon. A man bumps into you. In a civilized place, you'd say, "Excuse me," and move on. Here, you demand an apology. He refuses. Words escalate. And suddenly, you're in a gunfight over nothing. You kill him, or he kills you. Either way, it started over something trivial, something that wouldn't have mattered anywhere else. But in early California, every interaction is a potential conflict. Every conflict is potentially lethal. And everyone knows it, so you walk around armed. Always, you sleep with a weapon. You trust no one. You're constantly assessing threats. And this state of perpetual vigilance, this constant readiness for violence, it changes your psychology. You become paranoid, aggressive, dangerous. You join vigilante committees because there's safety in numbers and power in mobs. You participate in lynchings. You execute people based on accusations, rumors, mob consensus. No evidence required. No trial. Just rope and fury. And you convince yourself it's justice, that you're making the community safer, that the men you're hanging deserve it. But you don't really know that. You just want to believe it. Because the alternative is admitting that you've become a murderer, that you've participated in extrajudicial killings, that you're no better than the criminals you're supposedly punishing. And you can't admit that. So you double down. You convince yourself that everyone you've harmed deserved it, that you're a good man doing necessary things. This is the psychological defense mechanism that allows normal men to commit atrocities, moral rationalization. You're not a bad person doing bad things. You're a good person doing what needs to be done in a bad situation. Except you're not. You're just a person who's adapted to a monstrous environment by becoming monstrous yourself. And the violence spreads. It metastasizes. It becomes the solution to everything. Business dispute, violence. Romantic rivalry, violence. Someone has something you want, violence. It's efficient, it's direct. And in early California, it works. The men who succeed are the ones willing to use force without hesitation or remorse. The men who maintain civilized restraint are the ones who get victimized. So you learn to strike first, to escalate quickly, to be more brutal than the other guy. You've become the kind of man who solves problems with violence, who threatens and intimidates as a matter of course, who kills when it serves his purposes. Back home, you would be called a violent criminal, a danger to society. Here, you're just being realistic, practical, a survivor. You've internalized the violence, made it part of who you are, and there's no going back from that. Now let's talk about what early California did to men's capacity for basic human decency toward the vulnerable. You arrive in California and within months, you're treating other human beings in ways you never imagined possible. Let's start with women. Back home, you probably believed in protecting women, treating them with respect, basic chivalry and decency. Here, women are commodities. If you're a mine owner or saloon keeper, you literally buy women, often Chinese women trafficked into sexual slavery, and force them to work in brothels. You profit from their bodies, from their suffering, from their complete lack of freedom. And you feel no guilt about it, because everyone else is doing it, because it's profitable. Because these women are others, foreign, non-white, non-Christian, and therefore not fully human in your reckoning. You become a trafficker, a sexual exploiter, a slaver. Or maybe you're not directly involved in prostitution, but you use the services. You pay to rape women who have no choice, no agency, no way out. Women who were kidnapped or sold or tricked into coming to California. And you tell yourself it's just business, just natural male needs. You don't think about their humanity. You don't want to, because if you acknowledge their humanity, you'd have to acknowledge what you're doing to them. Even respectable women aren't safe. If you encounter a woman alone, traveling, working, trying to survive, you assume she's available. You harass her. You proposition her. You assault her if you think you can get away with it, because there are no consequences. There's no law enforcement that takes crimes against women seriously. There's no social structure that protects them. Women are vulnerable in early California, and you've learned to exploit vulnerability. Now let's talk about children. Back home, you probably believe children should be protected, nurtured, allowed to be children. Here, children are labor. You hire children, 8, 9, 10 years old, to work in your mine or your business. You pay them pennies. You work them in dangerous conditions. You don't care about their education or their childhood or their future. They're cheap labor. That's all that matters. And if they get hurt or killed, there's always another desperate child who needs work. You've become the kind of man who exploits children for profit, who sees them as economic units rather than human beings deserving protection. Or maybe you're not employing them, but you're certainly not protecting them. You see a child being abused, being starved, being forced into horrible situations, and you look away. Not your problem, not your responsibility. The basic human instinct to protect children, one of the most fundamental social instincts we have, you've suppressed it, ignored it, killed it. Now let's talk about immigrants and racial minorities. You probably arrived in California without strong racial prejudices. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. But either way, early California amplifies and weaponizes those prejudices. Chinese workers are everywhere doing the most dangerous jobs for the lowest pay, and you resent them. You're struggling and their competition for jobs and claims. So you support racist laws that specifically target them. You participate in violence against Chinese communities. You rob Chinese miners and justify it because they're foreign and don't belong. You've become a racist vigilante, or consider Native Americans. The genocide against California's native population is one of the darkest chapters in American history. Between 1848 and 1870, the native population drops from around 150,000 to under 30,000. And many white Californians participate actively or passively in this genocide. Hunting parties, massacres, land theft, cultural destruction. You might be one of them, or you might just benefit from the land they're driven from. Either way, you're complicit. You've become part of an ethnic cleansing campaign. This is what early California does to men's basic humanity. It teaches you to exploit the vulnerable, to see certain people as less than human, to profit from suffering without remorse. You've become a monster not just in what you do to your equals, but in what you do to those who can't fight back. And that might be the most monstrous transformation of all. If you want to see what early California's transformation of men looked like at its absolute worst, look at the Sacramento Squatter Riots of August 1850. The situation is this. Sacramento is growing rapidly. Land is valuable. But there's confusion about who actually owns what. You have men who bought land from John Sutter, the original land grant holder. And you have squatters who claim the land is actually public domain and that they have a right to settle it. It's a legal dispute. In a civilized place, it would be resolved in court. But this is early California, and both sides have guns. The conflict escalates for months, threats, intimidation, small skirmishes. And then on August 14, 1850, it explodes. A mob of squatters, hundreds of armed men, attacks Sacramento. They're not attacking criminals. They're attacking other settlers in a dispute over property. The violence is insane. Buildings are set on fire. Men are shot in the streets. The mayor of Sacramento is killed trying to restore order. City sheriff is shot and killed. Men who were farmers, clerks, laborers back home are now participating in an armed insurrection. They're committing arson, murder, terrorism. And here's the thing, both sides believe they're in the right. Both sides have convinced themselves that violence is justified, that they're defending their rights, that the other side are the criminals. This is what early California does to moral reasoning. It allows men to commit atrocities while believing they're righteous. The riot eventually ends. Order is restored temporarily, but several people are dead, dozens are injured, the city is traumatized. And what happens to the perpetrators? Some are arrested, a few are tried, most face no consequences at all. Because everyone understands, in early California, violence is just how things get settled. This moment, this riot, it's the perfect encapsulation of the transformation we're talking about. You have ordinary men from ordinary backgrounds committing extraordinary violence, burning buildings, murdering officials, terrorizing a city, and they sleep fine that night because they've convinced themselves it was necessary, justified, right. They're not monsters, they tell themselves. They're defenders, patriots. Men standing up for their rights, but they are monsters. They've been transformed by the environment they're in, by the lawlessness, by the desperation, by the complete absence of moral accountability. They're men who would never have dreamed of doing these things back home. But early California has remade them. It stripped away their civilized veneer and revealed or created something savage underneath. This is the darkest truth of early California. It didn't just bring out the worst in men. It made the worst seem normal, necessary, justified. It turned normal men into monsters, and then it convinced them they were still the good guys. Now think about your life today. You face adversity. You struggle financially. You're frustrated with the legal system. You have conflicts with people. You feel desperate sometimes, but you don't steal, you don't kill, you don't exploit the vulnerable, you don't participate in mob violence. Why not? Because you live in a world with structure, with law, with accountability, with social consequences for bad behavior. You live in a world where morality is affordable, where you can be a decent person without it destroying you, where virtue isn't punished and vice isn't consistently rewarded. You live in a world with safety nets. If you're desperate, there are options beyond crime. If you're victimized, there are authorities you can appeal to. If someone wrongs you, there are legal remedies. You live in a community that knows you, that has expectations of you, that will judge you if you behave monstrously. All of these structures, law, accountability, community, social pressure, economic safety nets, they allow you to be a decent person. They make morality possible. Early California had none of that. And without those structures, normal men became monsters, not because they were inherently evil, but because the environment demanded it, rewarded it, made it necessary. You like to think you're different, that you would have maintained your morals, that you would have been one of the few good men in a sea of corruption, but statistically you wouldn't have been, because the vast majority of men who went to early California underwent this transformation. Good men, church-going men, family men. They became thieves, killers, exploiters, and participants in atrocities, not because they were bad people, but because bad circumstances create bad behavior. You're not morally superior to them. You're just luckier. You were born into a world with structures that support moral behavior. They were thrown into a world that punished it. The difference between you and the monsters of early California isn't character, it's context, and that should terrify you, because it means that under the right or wrong circumstances you could be transformed too. We all could. That's the lesson of early California. Early California turned normal men into monsters. That's not an exaggeration, it's historical fact. Ordinary people, people who probably weren't much different from you, underwent a moral transformation so complete that they became unrecognizable even to themselves. They stole, cheated, killed, and exploited. They participated in genocide. They trafficked women and children. They formed mobs and lynched people without trial. They committed atrocities and convinced themselves they were righteous. And here's what you need to understand. This wasn't because they were uniquely evil. It was because the environment stripped away everything that makes moral behavior possible. No law, no accountability, no community standards, no consequences for bad behavior, no rewards for good behavior, just desperation, greed, and survival. In that environment, morality became a luxury, and almost no one could afford it. We live in a very different world today. A world with laws and institutions and social structures that support, even require, decent behavior. We're not better people than they were. We just live in a better world. And we should be grateful for that every single day. Because the capacity for monstrosity exists in all of us. It's not a bug in human nature. It's a feature that emerges under the wrong conditions. Early California proved that, and it's a lesson we should never forget. If you want to learn more about what life was really like in early American states and territories, check out our other historical documentaries. Because understanding how bad things can get helps us appreciate and protect what we have now. Don't ever take civilization for granted. It's more fragile than you think.